My name is Avneeta. I'm currently a junior in high school. I'm from the Bay Area in California. And in terms of career-wise, I'm interested in marketing and business, along with AI and CS world is evolving. And thank you everyone for all the introductions in the chat and John for your verbal introduction. And now I think Tia can introduce herself as well.
Yeah, I'm a sophomore in high school and I'm really interested in how small businesses work and how owners handle all the challenges they face. Specifically, both my parents are small business owners, and I've seen and I've heard them talking about what they struggle with and how they feel overwhelmed in so many different areas, whether it's just operations or marketing. And we've noticed that there's a lot of advice out there, but it's often confusing or hard to know what really works. So that's why we created this nonprofit to connect business owners with experts who can explain things in a clearer way. So today we're going to talk about marketing actually drives results. Heidi is here to share her experience on positioning, go-to-market strategy, and building systems that help your business grow. And I'll hand it over to Avneeta to introduce her.
Yeah, thank you. So, for those of you who haven't want to know Heidi a little bit better before the presentation, she's a fractional CMO, GTM advisor, the author of the Growth Formula. Heidi has over 25 years of experience helping B2B founders and leadership teams build clear focused go-to-market plans, measurable growth systems. She helps business owners move from busy marketing activity to more strategic approaches that actually help grow their business effectively. So, me and Tia and all of you here today should be honored to have her here as a speaker. As Heidi goes through her presentation, feel free to jot down your questions. As mentioned before, we'll be having a main Q&A session at the end, but Heidi has planned to make this presentation more interactive. So, I think you can also feel free to drop questions in the chat if you want them to be answered right away.
That's great. Thank you so much for that intro. So why don't I share and we can start to get going. Can everyone see that? Yeah. Yeah, so thank you so much. And I'm just so impressed. I mean, we have two ladies from high school driving this. Makes me think that's amazing what they're able to accomplish. And I'm just really honored to be a speaker here and to be part of it and really helping them get this nonprofit business off the ground too. So gone to a couple of sessions already and strongly recommend it for future. I'll be at future sessions too. So thanks again for hosting and bringing together small businesses. Okay. So I'm just going to share briefly, I pretty much cover my background. The type of customers I work with now, primarily B2B, but I also have the B2C experience. And so the clients I work with, I'd say about half of them are in the biopharma, health tech, regulatory space. And then the other half are other types of businesses and services, manufacturing businesses. But one thing, common thread, whether it's consumer, whether it's B2B, whether it's government, so many businesses just really need that starting point before they dive into all the latest tools, AI, and start to add tech, start to add complex processes. And that was really the essence on why I wrote the book, The Marketing Growth Formula, was the idea, let's get back to some of that positioning, really understanding your market, and then simplifying it to go deeper in certain areas. So that's the essence of what I'll be sharing today. And like I said, I'm going to have some exercises throughout so that you can apply it to your own business or at least thought process. Here's one of the greats, Peter Drucker, very much known for strategy. And then one of his quotes is, the two most important functions of a business are innovation and marketing. And you can imagine innovation because of refreshing, staying current, but then marketing, just because it's so recognized, that's how foundational it is for businesses. So I thought it'd be a great place to start. But then the irony is marketing is not well understood. So even though people agree that it's really important, just not always well understood. So an example of why that is, sometimes you see marketing activity mistaken for impact, right? It doesn't always equal activity. It doesn't always equal impact. And AJ was saying before this too, you could even throw sales in here. Sometimes people confuse marketing with sales or think that, well, that's sales or hire on sales, but they haven't really thought through on marketing. Whereas really marketing is more of that foundation. So if you hear things like, oh, but we post every day, or our marketing team's really busy, or people just know our product. I hear that a lot with technical companies, that they understand the product and it should just sell itself, or it's this breakthrough idea. So why do I need marketing? But then a lot of times companies will realize that things they've done in the past aren't necessarily working now. I see that a lot with small businesses where, let's say it was the founder knew a ton of people, all the business came in that way. But then now with digital, they've got more competition. People are finding out about other companies are coming in and entrenching on their space. And so the world's really changed. And even what was working 2 years ago is completely different today. So that's really kind of set the scene. And then I thought, oh, no marketing presentation would be complete without the 4 Ps. And if you're familiar with this, it's basic, but it's just good to be grounded. So in addition to Peter Drucker, I'm throwing in Philip Kotler, who's one of the greats in marketing. And he's really the one, he was from Northwestern, who really created the 4 Ps. I know there's now the 7 Ps, there's 4 Cs of marketing, but this is where it all started. He's the one that created product, price, place, promotion. And the idea is that you've got to know what you're selling, what's your offer, whether it's a product, a physical product, a service, software, what's your product? Then there's the commercial, the value, how much, right? And what's interesting about that is there's this great saying that says, if you have a great idea, if you've got a great product, but no one's willing to spend money on it, then really what you have is a hobby. And so we're all here because we want to take something commercial. And even for a nonprofit, nonprofits are still bringing people in the door, they're getting commitments, they're still transacting. So thinking always about what's that value of what I've created to the end market. And then the channels, we're going to talk about that today too, which is the where. Those are your marketing channels, how people show up, whether it's events, could be online, could be ads. So there's more channels now than ever. So we'll look at that, and then promotion. And then what I started out talking about is sometimes people get confused with, or they overemphasize the promotion side of marketing, right? I'm sure you can all think of examples where you just think about the side of marketing where it's you see a megaphone or you see about announcing, right? That's only one small element, right? That's one piece. But you really need all of these to play together, and it's coming up with that holistic strategy. So that's the concept there. Thinking about it too as the bridge to revenue. So I always say you probably hear about storytelling, right? And the idea is that you're building a story or a brand about what your company's about, what's your purpose, who you serve. And then you're looking at, well, how do I create a system to convert that, nurturing that interest? Because everyone who comes to you may not be even ready to buy today, or those who you reach out to may not be ready, but you want to stay top of mind. And that's actually the essence behind email marketing and why people are posting on social. They want to be remembered. Same idea with advertising, knowing that a certain percentage will be ready to come to you. And then growth is all about turning that into advocates. So you've got these customers now. How can they now speak on behalf of your product? More important than ever now are reviews, especially for small businesses, right? I'm sure all of you are out looking for Google reviews, or if you're on LinkedIn, getting referrals on LinkedIn, G2, comparing for software. So there's so many ways to be able to determine the credibility of a company. And that's why, because people are doing so much more research now, you want to make sure that you've got those reviews in good shape. If it's just referrals from someone, asking them to be able to refer you is really important as well. So those are some of the key tenets around marketing as we get started. And I can't actually see the chat. So Tia or Anita, if you could just, if there's a question or something as it goes, for some reason the chat. So here's a great stat though, and I don't know if anyone's seen this before, but 80% of the buying journey, so the buyer's journey, happens before a buyer talks to sales. I've been watching that number go up over the years. It used to be like 60%, and it's now at 80. And what's interesting is a lot of companies put a lot of focus on sales. What's the salesperson going to say when they get on that call with the buyer? But what's ironic is that now more than ever, especially with all of the tools, there's more research going on before they get to the company. And the reason for that is mostly that they want an unbiased view. They want to do their own research because they know that once they speak to someone at the company, they're going to just get that, only be told what that company does, hear all the good things. It's not really a balanced view. And so they want to get educated on the options before they start to speak to companies. AI has also enabled a lot of this discovery, and we'll look at some specifics that you can use around that as well. But keep this in mind about why you need to have marketing in place. It's because your salespeople may not automatically be able to talk straight to the customers. Again, all of this research is happening beforehand. So what's happened though too is because there's so many channels just on social media alone, there's so many channels, there's more ads, there's lead lists, there's more events than ever, webinars, Zoom, outbound emails. People are just saturated, right? And so this makes the marketing team very busy. And so sometimes for larger companies, for marketing, it can feel like a little bit of a tactical treadmill. There's expectations. People think marketing can be really easy. Oh, why can't we just be here and there? But you've got to match the budget very much to what it is you're trying to get for outcome. And really, it ties to the company goals. So that's true whether it's a large enterprise or whether it's a medium-sized SaaS company or a small new business. It's really setting up what are your company goals? Is it that you're trying, who are you trying to reach? And then being able to set up quantifiable goals to meet those, you'll be more on the right. And this is I published this in my book too. I created this to be able to show the difference. When you've got it more strategic and measured, then basically what you're doing is you're saying, okay, we've got one specific campaign, let's say around a given theme, and then everything's going to fall in place around that, whether it's article, a trusted advisor type article, email campaign, social media around it. It could be a key theme at an event, but then everything starts to play together as opposed to feeling like popcorn, where it's all just kind of popping up in different places. So intentional is the key word here. Does this resonate? Do any of you see where, and you can just unmute or pop it in the chat. But I think this is one of the most common issues that we hear around marketing is just the overwhelm. Okay. Oh, here's the chat. Okay. Okay. So let's just kind of tee up like 3 different questions to get started. So think about for your business, and I want to make this interactive. So at least take a second, and even if you're not going to put it in the chat, just think about who do you help. Well, and we're going to go a little deeper on this, but can you, and if you're working for a company, that's fine. Think about who your company helps, but you should have a real clear idea of the type of customer that you help. And most important, like the number one, actually most important on here is what problem do you solve for them? So first you have to know who you're helping, but what problem do they have that you can then come in and solve? And then we can get to the positioning of your company, why you've got the better solution, why they should follow you. But there's a lot of companies that they'll launch a product and it's such a breakthrough, and they're thinking about how great the software is, how great the product is, but they're not really thinking so much about the problem set. And so that's when you hear this long list of features, and it just becomes a long feature set as opposed to just diving into what's that problem. A really good example is in accounting, right? For ERP and some of the software there, there's been different iterations over the years, different types of software, but still the data, it's difficult. You have to move it from system to system. So the companies that have been able to come in to say, well, we can solve that pain point. So the pain point is the disparate data in different systems. The solution can be a software tool that can help move the data or help automate and bring that through. And then why a given company would do that, then you can start to look at, well, how are they better than their competitors or what's different? So that's a great place to start. And then a really common term now is around the ideal customer profile. I think if you go back a few years, you would have heard target market. But I think somewhere along the lines, as marketers, we realized it wasn't a great idea to put a target on a customer. And so now it's much more around ideal customer profile. And when I run this with companies that I'm advising, we'll do like entire workshops just on ICP. It's one of the most difficult things to get right, because especially for new businesses, if you're selling a service or if you're selling a new product, you'll work with anybody, right? You're pretty open, you're industry agnostic. But then as you start to see where you can solve the problems, you start to hone that in, really be clear on who that ideal customer is. So for example, it could be around industry. A lot of times people will specialize in a given industry. When I introduced myself, I had said that about half of my clients are within the biopharma and biohealth space, but then I also recognize the other half are other industries. But it could be revenue size. So, and then if you're on the consumer side, definitely you're going to look at a certain type of consumer, if it's a certain product that they're looking to buy, or if it's a certain demographic, that's where that information would go. So it's firmographics, or in the consumer side, demographics. I put the buying process in because I think it's so important to understand that up front and be really conscious about how your buyer transacts. So if you're selling, let's say, a software product or something where they can sign up online, that's one way to do it. That's more of like a product-led strategy. But if you need to know, if you're in an enterprise, if they're going to issue an RFP, or request for quote, or is the person you're talking to, do they have the budget? And so on the consumer side, if it's a family, is this a bigger decision where the family needs to decide, like a car, or is it something smaller where an individual could decide and would have the budget? And then in the B2B world, it's, again, you really want to know if it's a buying team, and we'll get into that in the next slide. But being very clear on who that actual buyer is in the process. And then the third area, which is probably the most important, is the problems. What problem or pain point do you address? And that can be as you look at your ideal customer profile. So in the ERP example, you'd be looking at both IT as well as, let's say, accounting, and finance, but really understanding the pain point. So another example would be companies that are growing. So if they're going for funding and they're at a certain seed round of funding, they've got to quickly then hire. Once they get that money in, they've got to make some decisions, or they've got to outsource and, start to show some progress, right? And so there's some problems that you can solve from that perspective. If it's a family business, like law, or again, with financial services, looking at trigger points like around taxes, or around mortgages, things like that. So you just want to look at what those problem statements are, the pain points that you solve. And then there's going to be other attributes that you have as well, like maybe some technical capabilities. Do you only go after private companies, or would you do public? What about government? So I'm just going to take a minute here, and I don't know if anyone wants to share in the chat. Is there anything that really jumps out at you as far as what you would, what you think is important? Like, what's the most important to you as you think about your ICP? Is it around like the firmographic side, or are you looking at more around some of the pain points? I'd say, or just unmute if you want to share anything.
I'm curious, Heidi, how do you educate or train business owners when they are looking for the impact side of things in short term? Because if I'm going to a sales meeting, for example, the outcome, depending on the sales cycle, is fairly quick. How did the meeting go? Were there some next steps decided? And then hopefully the outcome is in the favor, I get the contract. That's the kind of mindset. When it comes to marketing, there are so many areas to focus on, especially when we look at the whole strategy. Sometimes people start counting like, okay, what is the return on my investment in short term? And how do you sort of educate them that it's overall a long-term game?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's actually one of the biggest questions, within marketing is, well, how do I know if this is working? So definitely testing out the different channels will help you. So for example, if you're, putting out some content to be able to, change it slightly to be able to see what's going to work, what isn't, but also coming back to ICP, looking at who are those customers that are saying yes, that are coming forward. And then what industries are they from? What commonalities do you see amongst them? Mm-hmm. And then, back to your point on the short term, long term, I do think you have to have both. So you've got to look for some quick wins so that you're seeing some traction, building on that. One of the ways you can tell if the ICP is off, if a lot of people are saying, oh, like back to the 4 Ps, your price is too much. It doesn't necessarily mean the price is too much. It could be that you're with a buyer that doesn't have a budget. This just isn't the right fit. So then you would have to come back to some of the attributes as well to see if you've really got the right ideal customer profile.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Good discussion. So let's go a step further then and look at the actual person. So,
Oh, sorry to interrupt,
oh,
Heidi, but I think there was a question in the chat as well
okay.
from Hannah,
Oh,
who is
Hannah.
a graduate student who's majoring in business analytics. And for her, it is a problem and a goal. Most customers will choose a company or a product which best solve their problems. So to be able to solve that will be important.
You are so right, Hannah, that being able to solve the problem, I think if you take one thing away today, that would be it as far as what problem do you solve? And can you help solve their problem? So because again, it's just so easy to go down all these fancy marketing channels. But if you can show how you solve problems, that will definitely be the way to go. One of the ways that you can know, and thanks for flagging that. One of the ways that you can know and get closer to your customers, don't just think of them as the company, but that now let's think about the actual persona. So in the consumer world, you see this a lot with advertising, that the demographics, males between 35 and 45, watch basketball, or even a certain age group, you kind of see the demographics very specific, and it's because of advertising, and it's because they're trying to get very specific, for the ads and for reaching it, because usually for consumer it's on some type of a more of a mass scale. For B2B, your persona is still important, and a lot of times that's a job role. So I listed a few here. It could be like the user, so the person who's actually using, let's say, the software, or if it's a machine, using the machine. And so you want to understand their day-to-day experience. What problems do they have? And then, but then there's other people involved in the buying process. So for example, there could be technical decision makers. So for software, again, that would be, maybe the CTO, CIO, somebody in engineering. So as you're doing your pitch, you would need to also address what their needs and concerns are. So I put over on the right, like specs and comparison. So again, if you're in a technical product, but you still want to be able to answer the questions from the business side, right? So it's going to be either be finance, or head of marketing, or commercial. And for a smaller company, it could be the founder themselves that's making the decision, right? But maybe you came in talking to, someone on their team, could be someone in procurement, or again, if it's a much smaller company, could just be, someone within the business. But being conscious of who's actually making that decision. And then if you're talking to an investor, then it's telling the whole story, right? What problems are solved, what's the impact, what's the long term, what's the roadmap, PR value, qualitative and quantitative. One thing though I found over the years is that, let's say that you're talking to someone technical, don't just only focus on the specs. You want to also show the broader story and what problems solve. And the same with the business. Sometimes people will present to someone in finance and they only show the numbers, but an investor or a finance person still wants to know that you're solving the problems. It's just a matter of emphasis. But this persona, it really pairs well with the idea of the ideal customer. So think of the ideal customer as your broader customer, and then the persona as the specific person that you're talking to. And that's going to make your messaging so much easier, because then you'll realize, like, oh, this is the type of person, their role, or if it's a consumer, the demographics around them, and also their interests, right? It's not just their demographics or firmographics, it's also what they care about and what's important to them. So Elaine Chen, she's a advisor in the field, and she has this great quote: "The customer is the expert of their problem, and you are an expert in finding a solution to their problem." So again, if we just keep that problem statement in mind, and as you're doing customer research and getting feedback, remembering that you want to really understand even better about their problem, and does this solution solve that? And I always recommend, especially early on, you want to get multiple data points, because you don't want to just quickly switch your product based on one data point. But at the same time, you don't want to ignore feedback and not get any feedback and then launch and then find out what the market thinks. So there's a balance. And then we come to the positioning. So, I talked about like why your company, why you're important. And that's like, it's actually a great exercise to go through. So again, we're just going to take a minute, just think about either the business you're in, or if you're thinking about launching a business, what, why should someone buy from your company? Because of course, there's probably going to be either substitutes or direct competitors. And one thing that people sometimes miss is because it's you, right? So if it's a more personal like service, just the fact that your brand and you're the founder side of it, you've got a story. That's part of it. Could be location. It could be that, hey, there's all kinds of solutions around the country or around the world, but you're that local. So sometimes people use the local angle, but more often it's going to be something that some type of IP, intellectual property, or something unique that you've created. And then you can create your brand or your story around that, which is really like that, the story and the trust, so that people can understand what you're about. Does this make sense? The positioning is before messaging. So this is like, where do I stand in the market? And you're going to really set yourself up for telling that story about how you're positioned differently. All right. So then you've got your positioning, you're thinking about your messaging, and now you need to think about like, okay, how do I set up my marketing so that things are repeatable? Because otherwise you're going to go out there with your messaging and all of your different channels. So you need to think about, well, how am I going to collect this information? And maybe it's a CRM, or maybe it's even just a spreadsheet, or it's a tool. But having some sort of repeatable way to capture the interest that's coming in, and then being able to send messages back. So sometimes people have email cadences. Certainly you want to have measurements and KPIs. But there again, you don't want to go too crazy. I know, AJ, you asked the question on KPIs, and just having a few to get started. Consistency is the most important to show up. So for example, if you're going to be in social media, it's more important to do, let's say, twice a week on LinkedIn than trying to do like every day for a few weeks and then nothing for a while. You just want like a nice steady drumbeat going. I like this. I'm a big fan of Atomic Habits, and so James Clear, the author, has this great quote: "You don't rise to the level of your goals; you fall to the level of your systems." And you're going to see that a lot with small businesses, where small business owners try, everything runs through them and they love it and it's exciting. But if you're going to be that one to help the business, or if you're a business owner yourself, you really need to start looking at systems so that you can then dedicate your time to your top customers, new prospects, strategy, things that are helping your business grow and scale. And so that's why you want to have repeatable, scalable systems. And that can just look like a simple tool to get started. Could be partnering and outsourcing. I work with a lot of companies on their marketing strategy and then help bring in marketing resources. A lot of times marketing is done as a hybrid. It doesn't mean you have to go off and hire everyone in-house. There's so many different solutions today to partner. I thought I'd throw this in because this comes up all the time as a question around, well, how do I get discovered? And, I'm doing all this great marketing, and the game has definitely changed. So I think everyone's familiar probably with SEO, the search engine optimization, because that's really been around for a long time around Google, right? The whole Google search and the algorithm. But then, well, how does AI fit into it? And the easiest way to think of it is that the first step of what you want to do is really switch to being the answer to someone's question. So there's a nice parallel to being the solution to someone's problem. And so that's how the first level of AI search is working, and that's why you see it written a lot of question answer. And in blogs, a lot of people are trying to do a little more question answer because they want to show up in some of these searches. And there's more sophisticated tools, but I'm just giving you the idea that there's still SEO, and all of the AI works on top of that. Then the GEO, or the generative engine, that's more of the LLMs and being referenced. So being cited, it's really being synthesized through. So the big thing that's changing is, before, when you would Google something, you would get like 10 links. Here, go off and look at these companies. That's changing already. Now you see these paragraphs that are written, even in Google, you'll just get that paragraph. So a lot more, many buyers now are doing their research straight through AI or even through Google and getting an AI answer, and they're not visiting the website as often. You still need a good, credible website, because the minute that someone hears about you or is thinking about doing business, that's the first place that they'll go. So it's still your front door, but they're probably not going to get the 10 links and go investigate that way. They'll get some type of a summary with like the top 3 recommendations. So search is still really important. The game's changing. It's just another example of you just want to move along with some of these changes. But what hasn't changed is the need to tell a great story, the need to solve customer problems, and the need to know who it is that is your ideal customer. So I'm going to switch gears then into, well, what are all these different channels and go to market, and then we'll do a fun exercise around that. But the go to market really encompasses sales, marketing, product, customer success, the delivery. But when you think about the go to market motions or the channels, I thought I'd list this out, and I put this in my book as well, which is just to kind of keep it simple of, well, there's, you might have heard inbound, outbound as terms. It's really simple that way. Like the outbound is you're sending an email or you're sending direct messages, you're doing ads, you're doing something that's casting that wider net. You're trying to personalize the outreach at scale, but it's definitely cold, which means you don't know the people you're getting it out there, whether it's consumer or on B2B. Inbound is interesting because it doesn't mean that they just happen to come to you. You've definitely, usually for inbound, you've done a lot of work to put out authority-based articles. So this is where you see interesting articles where people become subject matter experts. I certainly put a lot of those out. LinkedIn posts that are a little bit longer form. Or you could put out lead magnets. So somebody's responding to something that you put out there, right? Content, or even on your website. Website's considered inbound as well. And then product and service led just mean that it's happening within the product. So a lot of software products, you see like, oh, if you want to go from the free version to the paid version, click here. That's a product led strategy because it means that it's happening within that product. You don't have to contact a salesperson. You don't have to go sign up somewhere. It's happening within. The same with service, where it's, new services are offered and then additional services are offered from there. It's usually a high touch relation. Events are great. You just have to be really selective because they're very expensive. There's a lot of work to get to an event, and then, being at the event for sponsorship and then afterwards as well. Partnerships and alliances are really good. You're probably, if you're a small business owner, being approached for partnerships. It can work really well when there's complementary skills. I don't know, T, are you raising your hand?
Sorry,
It can
no.
work. Oh, it's okay. It can work really well complementary. I've seen a lot of tech companies partner up with, let's say, marketing companies or those with like a much wider commercial distribution. That's an example. Community is also really growing. One of the best examples of community is Legos because they've got people talking about their product, creating the product together. Another good example is software groups like for Salesforce, the product where they get together and talk about how can they optimize it. And then account-based marketing is more on the B2B side. So that's where you're going to pick a handful of accounts, go really deep, and everybody's going to be all in marketing, sales, really trying to figure out who are the right contact points within those accounts. And then there's others, customer-led, referrals, many, many more. So, I'll make this available, but one thing I would recommend for you to do is try to identify what are your top 2 go-to-market or marketing channels. And, and it could be, you can even go deeper within that. So let's say if it's social media is one of your top ones, then what are your top 2 channels? Rather than trying to, be great on 7 things, right? Like, is it LinkedIn more on the business B2B side, or is it TikTok, or is it YouTube? Let's say if you're doing a lot of videos, it could be multiple, but when the clients I'm working with, we always select 1 just to get started, or 2 on social media. But then a lot of times it's events too. So for companies, let's say in manufacturing, where there's a lot of expertise and it's very specialized niche, they'll show up at certain industry events, and a lot of the business happens there. A lot of the new leads come in that way. So I would say just take a minute now and kind of look this over. I want to also pause to see if there's any questions about what are any of these, or have you thought about any of these? So just take any comments here.
So, Heidi, based on the industry, are there certain areas that one should focus more, or it's more based on the strength of the company who is doing the marketing?
It's such a great question. And I mean, you're right to point it out because, this would be an area that I'd work for weeks and, months with customers on, trying to figure out like what's going to work the best for them. So some of it is testing it out. And I would say the most important factor is where do your ideal customers show up? And it's going to be more than one because, for example, a lot of the companies I've worked for, the events tended to be more of an influence, right? Like in the tech
Mhm.
space, it was more of an influence, but they weren't necessarily going there to make a buying decision. They were just going to see what was on the market. But you follow that up then with emails, something very personalized and specific. A webinar is another good example. And so I would say it's a combination, but
Mhm.
the most important is to figure out where your customers are and then trying to tie to that. So, yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
Heidi, what do you do when you have when it's such a large market, right? I mean, my potential market is 90 million households in America who own pets. And there's
Uh-huh.
so many personas of people. Like
Yeah.
how do you sort through where to start? Like
Yeah, no, it's like,
and is it okay to have multiple personas as you're
oh,
thinking through your marketing strategies?
yeah. So first, thanks for the question. I'm glad you brought that up on the multiple personas. Definitely, you want to have a couple of personas. I would start though with just a handful, so it doesn't get too splintered, and then try to look at, what are going to be the most critical there of, what do they have in common, and then where do they show up in the same type of channels. The other thing to think about is, could there be a partner strategy where is there somebody already distributing to, let's say, one of those personas that you could, be able to get your product or your solution as part of, especially because it's so wide, right? And then, um, but then with the online tools, you could also have so much opportunity there, whether it's through, Amazon, or like you said, with pets like Chewy or something like that. So it's a matter of evaluating and kind of going through, the different opportunities. But yeah, definitely have multiple personas and try to see where you can get some commonality. Yeah. Edna, thanks for joining.
Thank you, Heidi. Gosh, this comes so timely. I am niching into my brand, and so I have like a list of people from, my past, and now that I'm niching down, they no longer fit that, avatar that I'm really niching to. And what is your recommendation in terms of, continuing to nurture them because they may become my avatar, or they may know somebody
Mhm.
that I can, or so what, yeah, that would be my question.
This is a really common scenario. For different reasons, people either change their niche or they niche down. So yeah, you're right. You want to still stay in contact with them. And then are you sending them emails, or what's your communication method?
Yeah, they receive a blog every week. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. So in there, you can also mention about if you know somebody, or can have ways to hint at that. And then what I would recommend is changing up your subject. So sometimes you could be speaking directly to them,
Mm-hmm.
talking about, what something that would be in common for them, but then also switching to kind of your like, and then the other week you could switch to, your new ideal customer profile, because you want to start bringing them
Yeah.
into the database, right? So whether you're bringing them in through social media and then they land on your email list, but yeah, you can speak to both audiences that way. Um,
Okay. That's
yeah,
beautiful because I was thinking, okay, how do I do this? I want to nurture, but I also want to build. But I don't
yeah.
work. I'm not going to be doing both. So that answers it. Thank you.
Oh, sure. Are they really different as far as the two different personas
Well,
markets?
I started as a life coach and now I'm
Mhm.
niching down to cancer patients only.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, some of them may be able to refer people that they know that have cancer, or
Oh my gosh. Or family
if
members that have,
family
yeah.
members. Yeah.
No, that's a
Um,
great mission. And that's a really good example where what you're providing still applies to them, or they may know
mhm.
somebody. And you might be
Right.
surprised because once you start talking about, oncology and cancer, all of a sudden they're going to think of somebody else that could be,
Right.
would actually work with you. So yeah, the two work together really well.
Okay.
John,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Just a quick question. So I kind of have two sets of customers, one via, I guess, community, Edna and AJ. BNI is a community, and I
Mm.
partner with videographers for a video office. So I've kind of focused that for BNI, and then it's mainly just LinkedIn. So I'm starting doing outreach. I guess my question to you is, do you recommend nurturing via emails and email lists, or do you recommend calling the people in that list? And I get it. There's because it's like I don't have a huge list, right? I've probably got probably 600 people in that list, but there are people in there that I've never spoken to, and I kind of feel like the emotional storytelling person inside of me needs to kind of pick up the phone and call them and engage. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so first, thanks for the question. I think it's great how you've identified these two different groups. I would do both. I would still continue the email nurture, but I would absolutely get on the phone, especially because you're comfortable with it. So that's the other thing I always advise with clients is that, there's some people that are like, oh, I just hate posting. And so it's like, well, don't force yourself to do that. Either hire someone to do it or, lean into a different channel. As you can see, there's so many channels. But I would, for your calls, definitely prioritize because your time is so important. So if you can look at your list, it is important. So if you can look at your list and maybe figure out like 10 just to start with, and then it just, you'll learn so much from those calls. And that might even
Yeah,
change a little bit of what goes into your email, but I would do both. Not feeling like you have to call all 600, but, start to tap into some of them just
good.
to see what they're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. I might have this beautiful voice and this, but I hate calling. I just like there's something. It's like I can happily write a post on LinkedIn or do video on LinkedIn, but
Yeah.
I can't pick up the phone and go, "Hi Heidi, it's John. We worked together 2 years ago, or you came to a workshop. How are you going?" That's all I'm doing, right? But I find it just incredibly. What if they say, "Go away"? It's a rejection thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, calling is tough, but it sounds like your part of you wants to do it. And,
Yeah,
or the other thing you could do is invite people to a call. That's the other way in your emails and, send them a lead magnet
sure,
too, or use
sure.
that.
Yeah, got
Yeah.
those. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, good discussion. I was hoping we'd have some good practical ideas there. So I'm going to move on. And, one thing when you're looking at measurements, and I'll share these slides, you want to think about qualitative and quantitative. Probably the easiest way this is how I like to think about it, is the qualitative is going to tell you more of the story, right? So you're kind of measuring the impact, the sentiment, how are your customers feeling about things, or your prospects. Quantitative is really like that scoreboard, right? So if you spend all the time looking at the score, you could miss the play. And then if you spend all the time just on the play, you might not realize how the score is going. So you need both as you're getting feedback for your customers, and then even before launch, or if you're looking at a new business area. So we're kind of wrapping up, but I mean, you really have all the key ingredients for your story. You know your product. You're going to dig deeper into who you're solving these problems for, and then why you. So that's really the essence of marketing. There's so much more to it, but the whole point on why I'm doing business is to say, like, let's keep it simple. Let's get to some of the foundations and dive into that. So I'm just leaving you with that thought on, reviewing the business goals, tie marketing to those company goals, considering your ideal customer profile, and then remember your specific buyer and buyer persona, and you can have multiple personas. Just don't have too many, right? You still want to keep it simple. And then you want to have a resource plan and a budget. You could consider a partnership or outsourcing. I can help you with creating that marketing plan for sure. And even larger companies, they don't try to do everything on their own, right? So think about what can you do? What can you have a tool do? What can and it's over time. You don't have to do everything day one. So I'm just going to leave you with two thoughts. So one is, as you go away, think about your ideal customer profile and how you solve problems for them. And I wanted to invite each of you for a free call to just to review, like review your business or review your ideal customer profile. I just thought it'd be a great chance to get to know each of you. If you want to do that, just no obligation. I won't, just thought it'd be nice way to connect and follow up. So I wanted to offer that to each of you. And I'll put a Calendly link in. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. And then you can follow me on LinkedIn. So I'll put that in the chat as well. And like I said, we'll share these slides. And then here's my email, Heidi@transforminsights.com. And I'll leave it at that. So while I'm setting that up, are there any other questions? I know we have a couple minutes left here. And then Tia and Nita, anything else you wanted to say before we go into Q&A?
Yeah, actually, Hannah asked a question earlier, in the chat. She said, "Has a small business, do you encourage to be active in all GTM channels or focus on a few and grow on them?"
Yeah, that's such a great question. Um, I would definitely say to start with what are your top two or three, and even within that. So let's say you say social media, then you've got to really pick like which channels are most applicable, and then yeah. So for example, you wouldn't want to go all in on a partner strategy and a community strategy and do your own inbound and outbound. So I would say pick a couple. When if we do a call, I can kind of help you with that, but pick a couple that makes sense for the type of business that you're in, who you're trying to reach, and where they show up. So like a really good example is if you need to just start from scratch and you don't know like key prospects, you may have to start with an outbound strategy where it's a little bit more cold, right? If you know people and there's like some warm leads or some referrals, then you want to get them onto a call so you can share a little bit more, maybe send them to a website. So all of these are not individual discrete, they kind of all play off each other. But something like a partner strategy is almost like a different direction than if you're going to do all the marketing yourself, because a partner strategy would mean, yeah, I'm going to team up with someone that I'll do this part and then they'll do a different part of it, right? And so there are some that are like you pick one direction or the other. But yeah, great question. You want to definitely focus.
So, if anyone else has any other questions, please go ahead and ask. But if not, first of all, I'd like to thank Heidi. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today. I definitely learned so much, and I don't even have a business, but I feel like I could market something now. And uh, we'd also like to thank everyone who joined us. We know how busy you all are, and it means a lot that you chose to spend part of your day with us. And we definitely hope that you're walking away with a few new ideas that you can start applying right away. And we'll also be posting Heidi's website and contact info, as well as a short recap on our website. And we'll also be sending a link to the recording later on, so keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, I also want to say thank you so much for sharing your presentation today. And I think like the way that you presented it made marketing seem a lot more clear and like actionable, because marketing itself seems very like um very broad. It seems like there's a lot to it, but you definitely like broke it down and helped me understand with your four P's. Even for me, that was familiar. My dad taught me PPMOC, so it was like even I could like relate or understand parts of your presentation. And I think like many of the tips that you gave would be helpful for me and Tia as well for this nonprofit. And again, thank you everyone who's joined for taking time out of your day. It really means a lot to us.